All right, welcome back everybody to the third episode of Cool's Reviews Deep Dives, kind of our more in-depth look at movies rather than our short reviews outside of our Chad Kalick ones. But we're pretty excited for this one. It's something we've really kind of thought about since our guest Robert was on the first time for Cool's interviews, and that's because we wanted to talk National Treasure. Sam, myself, and Matt had just watched it again Friday, so this is pretty exciting. And of course, Robert himself is a Freemason, so who better to talk maybe some of these talking points I have than Robert himself. So, Robert, thank you again for joining us.
Oh yeah, thank you guys for having me back on Culz Paranormal. It's my pleasure to be here, and yeah, I mean National Treasure. That's a movie that I took on very early on in all this. That actually appears in my very first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. Interesting movie to say the least.
Yeah, I was watching a video today, kind of doing some other research outside of just watching the film itself. And somebody said a lot of modern Freemasons got into Freemasonry because of National Treasure. And have you seen that yourself, being a Freemason?
I would say yes. I would say it was more. I mean, yeah, I would say definitely at that time period when that movie came out. That movie was released right around the same time Da Vinci Code was released, and I would definitely not disagree with what you're saying that those two movies definitely ignited a new interest in Freemasonry, as well as at that same time this was kind of when the internet was sort of moving out of its infancy stage to a certain extent. So I think all three of those things, both the Da Vinci Code movie, certainly National Treasure, and sort of the maturing internet, definitely renewed interest in Freemasonry. I don't disagree with that.
It definitely has a lot of symbolism. I kind of recapped the second one real quick today, because when we went in watching it, I had kind of mixed them up as far as Book of Shadows. Um, as far as Book of Shadows, before we get into this one, does that is that a lot of Freemason stuff as well?
There's citations in National Treasure 2 that relates to the first movie because the first movie is a retelling of a Masonic ritual. And when you understand that, the second movie has little allusions to this as well. And so the answer is yes, there is stuff still going on in the second one.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had that mixed up when we were watching that because I was like, they started in the Arctic, and I was like, I thought, spoilers for the second one. I was like, I thought they were separated, blah blah blah. And Matt's like, no, that's the second one. I was like, okay, my bad, my bad. Uh, all right, so yeah, National Treasure. I think this was 2004 that it came out.
That sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, 2004, 2005 ish, and it stars the one and only Nicolas Cage as Benjamin Franklin Gates, and his whole family has a lot of interesting history. If you've watched the two, I haven't watched the series that they have on Disney Plus, so I have no idea if they incorporates it. But he's named Benjamin Franklin after probably Benjamin Franklin, who himself was a Freemason. Robert, do you want to kind of go into like Benjamin Franklin and his role with Masonry?
Yeah, I mean, sure. He was a very prominent Freemason, and he was a former Grand Master of the state of Pennsylvania, and of course, he is well known for having, during the Revolution, to travel to France to whip up support for the American colonies, and this was done through his Masonic connections, and of course, the lodge in France that which was sort of the big esoteric main lodge in France, was the Temple of the Nine Sisters. This was the lodge, of course. I mean, everyone knows the story where Franklin was present when Voltaire was initiated into the lodge, and it was through his connections with the Nine Sisters Lodge that he was able to get support for the American colonies. And later, this was the lodge that also John Paul Jones was a member of. He was, of course, the founder of the United States Navy. So, yeah, I mean, this again is just another example of how Freemasonry really, helped define the United States of America. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, I mean, George Washington aside, Ben Franklin, probably like the second most important Freemason during the American Revolution.
Yeah, and super famous, obviously, here. Everyone learns about Ben Franklin when they're in elementary school. And so, yeah, it's pretty interesting when you go back and see a lot of the historical figures that were Masons. The movie claims nine of the founding fathers. Is that a correct number, or is that a little bit of an exaggeration?
It's I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but that sounds about right. It's not. Some people say it's all of them. It wasn't all of them, but I think it's like around 9 to maybe 12 people who signed the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons, and there's also a slate of them that signed the United States Constitution ratifying it. Some of their names escape me, but of course Franklin was one, and yeah, I mean, it ties into the one thing that I do like about the movie. It does tie into the idea of the United States being sort of this Masonic republic. And again, we can get into it. The movie is literally, I mean, this is what escapes a lot of people, is literally a Masonic ritual, put on screen, brought to life. It's a rite in the high degree bodies, a very important one. It's the subject of my first book. But yeah, I mean, it's the what I mean, I like National Treasure. I think it's a very good movie. I think it's very entertaining, and I think that it accomplishes what the Da Vinci Code tried to be. And I think it's a very good movie.
Yeah, it definitely holds up. We watched it, like I said, Friday. Yeah, Friday. And
Hmm.
yeah, it held up really well because I hadn't watched it in a few years. I watched it in school and then I watched it when I bought it. And then it's been a long time, so it definitely held up. It starts off, they're looking for the Charlotte, which is a real ship. It went missing around Newfoundland. And so in the movie, they find a, what was it, the pipe?
The pipe is the first clue, I believe.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it has some symbolism. And I wanted to get into like how many artifacts kind of like that are there? I mean, that is it like realistic to find maybe something like that hidden?
No, I think the secret of the movie is it's a ritual. The whole movie is a Masonic ritual. That's the whole undercurrent of the thing. I mean, the whole movie revolves around the discovery of this Knights Templar treasure in this subterranean treasure vault, and that's a Masonic ritual. That's the 13th of the Scottish Rite and the 7th of the York Rite, called the Royal Arch of Enoch, where the treasure vault of the Knights Templar or the Temple Builders is discovered on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, this secret treasure in a subterranean vault. They move it to New York City, and there's a reason for that. Is because of a guy named DeWitt Clinton, who is sort of the guy who runs the country masonically behind the scenes after the death of Washington. And of course, the treasure vault is also on holy ground, in Trinity Church, in a subterranean vault. So the one thing that's really unique about the movie is you're looking at a Masonic ritual. I mean, you're literally looking at this 13th degree brought to life Hollywood style by Walt Disney, and that's really the key to the whole movie. I like, of course, they get into the setting of Washington D.C. with the net with I think this kind of ties into more what you were asking me was, with Washington D.C. and of course there's a lot of symbolism with Washington D.C. with Freemasonry. They go to Independence Hall, of course, and again, this with the Declaration of Independence, and they wind up in Independence Hall. And again, this whole thing ties into Royal Arch Freemasonry. There's a reason why Pennsylvania is the Keystone State. And Pennsylvania Avenue connects the two elected branches of government, or the three the House, Senate, and presidency, connected by Pennsylvania Avenue. Pennsylvania is the keystone that ties into Royal Arch Masonry. So in that aspect of it, yeah, I mean, a lot of that is definitely very, very, very Freemasonic, and encodes a lot of what I would call the Masonic sort of occult, hidden side of the craft. And again, that's one of the reasons why I like the movie so much. And it was a movie that was so important to me, that I actually it's actually in my very first book. It's actually in the Royal Arch of Enoch book, is where I analyzed it. It's not in any of the movie books. It's actually in my Masonic book, because I mean it's just so overtly Masonic, but then it has this real deep Masonic undertones that most people don't pick up on. That you're actually watching a Masonic rite on the big screen.
Yeah, and it definitely, I mean, even to like plain Jane people, they definitely can pick up on some of the symbol. I mean,
Right,
obviously,
right,
even at the end, the main FBI agent has the Masonic ring on, and so I mean,
right.
those are a real thing, right? Masonic rings.
Yeah, there's two of them for you. I don't know if you can see those or not. Let me pull this up. Hang on. Yeah, there you go. Those are two of mine right there that I'm wearing. One's the Blue Lodge and one is the Scottish Rite that I just happen to have on. So yeah, no, Masonic rings are commonplace. A lot of Freemasons wear Masonic rings or lapel pins or any or stuff like that. Yeah, I mean absolutely. Most Masons I know wear the rings.
Okay, cool. So, hey, look, a little bit of truth there as well. We were able to confirm that. Thank you for helping.
Of
Uh,
course.
so it opens up with the story. Christopher Plummer is telling young Ben Franklin Gates about, kind of the history and the story of Charles Carroll, who was the last living signer of the Declaration. He was on his way to go talk to Andrew Jackson, but never was able to. But he was able to pass at least along, this story of the treasure. Now, was he actually a Freemason? Because I heard he was Catholic, and I didn't know if that contradicted at the time.
Right, right. He is a Freemason. He's a very important person in all this because the Carroll family is huge in Freemasonry because um, you had Charles Carrollton of Charles Carroll, and I believe I don't know if he's a signer of the Declaration of Independence, but I believe he's a signer of the Constitution. I'd have to go look that up. He and his brother Daniel Carroll were both Freemasons. John Carroll, who was the first Archbishop here in the United States, first Archbishop of Baltimore, he's the Jesuit. And if you're familiar with the high degrees, it's a unique link because the high degrees of Freemasonry are born by the Jesuits. The Jesuits in Paris, France, in the 1750s generate the high degrees of Freemasonry as part of the Counter Reformation. They try to use them as a vehicle to restore the Stuart pretenders back to the throne of England. But at any rate, you have this unique paradigm between Charles Carrollton, who's a Catholic and a Freemason, then you've got his brother John Carroll, who's the Jesuit, and you have Daniel Carroll, who is a Freemason. I believe Daniel Carroll, I'd have to go look this up. I believe he does. One of them signs both of them. I think it's Daniel Carroll who signs both the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. And Daniel Carroll owned the land that ultimately became Washington, D.C. And of course, this is one of the nexuses between the Freemasons and the Jesuits because you have the Masonic district, the federal district, Washington, D.C., which is, of course, a Masonic template. But then inside of the federal district, of course, you have the Jesuit College, Georgetown University, of which John Carroll was the head of. So, of course, you have the Jesuit school locked inside the Masonic federal system. And again, it's a nexus between the high degrees of Freemasonry, which was created by the Jesuits, and of course the Blue Lodge. So that's a unique paradigm right there. But yeah, I mean, and of course the guy he was going to see, Andrew Jackson, was also a Freemason, and he's a very important one also, former Grand Master of the state of Tennessee, and he's critical because he is involved not directly, but he is one of the political leaders that was affected by the William Morgan affair of the 1820s, where this guy named William Morgan was threatening to expose Masonic secrets. The Masons abducted him, took him over the line to Canada, and he was never seen from again. And this caused this huge Masonic backlash in the country, and it nearly wiped it out. But Jackson stood up to it and wouldn't cave into it, and he's one of the real reasons why masonry, continued on in the country. It didn't fold up and disappear. And on a side note, if you're familiar, one of the guys who was writing at this time during the William Morgan affair was a guy you may have heard of named Edgar Allan Poe. And if you're ever familiar with the story, The Cast of Amontillado, that's an allegorical retelling of the William Morgan affair, where the character of Fortunato is a Freemason and gets bricked up by the Masons' tools and never seen again, just as Morgan was abducted by the Masons and was never seen again. So just an interesting little allegory there. But no, yeah, like I said, National Treasure. That's again one of the reasons I kind of liked it was whoever made it. I mean, it was Disney who put it out, but I mean, the material in it I thought was very well presented and very well done. And I mean, it's obviously a work of fiction. The ritual isn't, of course, but I mean, I thought they stood true to a lot of the Masonic lore, and certainly they definitely encapsulated the je ne sais quoi of the Royal Arch of Enoch ritual.
Yeah, no, fascinating. I know Andrew Jackson's come up a couple times for different topics. The last, I think, was the Bell Witch. We were talking about, he's pretty famous in the story. I don't think we can actually place him that he was there, but at least in the story of the authentic history of the Bell Witch, he does go over to see what's going on because it takes place again in his home kind of state there. Now, also in this opening, he's retelling kind of this history, he shows him the dollar because the Eye of Providence is on the back. Now, when was this adopted into Freemasonry? Was this always there, or was this a later thing?
You will find the Eye of Providence used in Freemasonry basically from the get-go. It's lifted. It has numerous meanings. The Eye of Providence, the Eye of Horus. It's Egyptian. It can also symbolize gnosis, awakening, consciousness. You will find it routine. The Masons Freemasonry's likely adopted from the works of a German mystic known as the magical shoemaker Jakob Böhm. And he writes a lot of alchemical and occult manuscripts, and the all-seeing eye is replete throughout his work. And I would suspect that that's probably where the Masons got it from, was from his work. But yeah, I mean, it's a symbol that is not only used by the Masons, but used by lots of groups. I mean, you can even find it. I mean, you could find that symbol being used in labor movements, in the suffragette movement. So it's a symbol that's very popular, and it can mean, of course, the Eye of Providence, the Eye of God, the Eye of Horus, but it can also just mean like awakening. Your eyes are opened. It's consciousness. Or you're alert. So yeah, I mean, it's you will find it very. I mean, going back in time to when Masonry was coming on the scene in England in 1717. Yeah, I mean, even in the early Masonic documents and degrees and symbols, trestle boards, broadsides. Yeah, I mean, you will always inevitably see the all-seeing eye there.
Yeah, it's outside of the actual, G and everything. I think it's the symbol I think everyone kind of thinks of when they think Freemasons.
Well, that's absolutely correct. That's a good point you make because in Europe, it's usually the square and compasses, and in the middle is the all-seeing eye. In the United States, that gets turned around a little bit, where it's the square and compasses, and in the middle it's the letter G instead of the I. They kind of that's more of, you're right. I mean, that's more of an American phenomenon. If you go to Europe or you go to England, it's much more common to see the all-seeing eye there instead of the letter G. That's true.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And that kind of takes us down our next route because they start talking about the Knights Templar. And because I know, isn't there the York Rights Knights Templar? And then
Right.
there's the Knight Templar. Like, how are they connected at all? Or are they kind of different? Or how does that work?
Right. So the way it works is, um, I got to get into a little Masonic history here. Is um, when Masonry comes on the scene, it's essentially a Protestant mystical brotherhood, and the Templar element comes in later, is injected later in 1738 by this Roman Catholic Jacobite named Andrew Michael the Chevalier Ramsay, who issues this oration to the Masonic lodges. And up until that time, it was the legendary history of Masonry had Masonry descending from God to Adam, and the temple builders who built the temple, the Tower of Babel were Masons, and then of course you get into the Egyptians with the pyramids, then you get into the Gothic cathedrals, and it's a legendary history. I mean, no Mason really takes it seriously, especially when you get into the biblical stuff. I mean, it's just no way of knowing. I mean, the theory is, of course, the first thing God taught Adam in the garden was Freemasonry, and the fig leaf is his Masonic apron. you get the general idea. Of course, again, it's legendary. No one really believes this. But Ramsay turns this on his head in 1738, and he says, I don't disagree with the idea of masonry, having to do with architecture and geometry and the Catholic, and the Catholic, cathedrals. I don't disagree with any of that. He said, but in a sense, he says that Masonry is essentially Roman Catholic. He said it's actually sort of the Roman Catholic religion, and that its origins lie with these group of warrior monks called the Knights Templar. And he says essentially when they were in the Crusades, they encountered the remnants of these mystery religions, such as the Eleusinian mysteries, the cult of Isis, the cult of Osiris, Mithras. And they were initiated into these pagan, rites, or at least were exposed to them, with the Saracens and what have you. And because of this, they imported this back to Europe, and they brought back from Europe, from the Middle East, the remnants of these ancient mystery religions, and this became Freemasonry. And it's from this oration that the high degrees develop, which is, of course, the Scottish Rite. Well, the original high degree body is called the Rite of Perfection. And again, this ties into the Jesuits as part of the Counter Reformation. It's a high degree body of 25 degrees that's designed to basically to infiltrate Freemasonry and restore the Catholic Stuarts back to the throne of England. It's out of this body, this Rite of Perfection, that the two main high degree bodies come out of. And they're really more a phenomenon in the United States, which is, of course, the Scottish Rite, which is established in 1801. And then running parallel with that is the York Rite, which is an invention of a guy named Thomas Smith Webb, who is DeWitt Clinton's basically sidekick. And the York Rite, you're correct, the York Rite culminates, the end ritual or the end body of the York Rite is the Knights Templar. In order to become a Knights Templar, you have to be a York Rite Freemason, and you have to be a Christian who has passed through the Royal Arch. That's the qualification. So the Knights Templar is a unique body in that it only accepts Christians. Most Masonry, most Masonic, well, not most, all Masonic lodges are deistic. You can, as long as you believe in God, you can join. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Jew, you can be a Buddhist, you can be Christian, you can be a deist. As long as you believe in a supreme being, you can join. Same with Scottish Rite. The York Rite is an exception to this, and it's only at the end degree that you have to be a Christian who has done the Royal Arch in the York Rite. You can only those people, only those men can join the Knights Templar. So in that aspect, it's somewhat of a modern invention of the late 18th century, early 19th century. The Knights Templar of the York Rite, though, incorporates all the color schemes, all the symbolism of the Knights Templar, of the medieval Knights Templar. So they're a little newer, but they incorporate all the same color schemes, all the same symbolism from the original Knights Templar of the Middle Ages. But again, this is more of an invention of DeWitt Clinton and Thomas Smith Webb in the late 19th, excuse me, in the late 18th, early 19th century. And again, it's the end body of the York Rite called the Knights Templar. And again, you have to be a Christian Freemason exalted to the Royal Arch in order to join that.
Yeah, and I know there's some other branches, um, as far as where what are the Eastern Stars and stuff. Is that those are like where females can join, correct?
Right. The female auxiliary is the Eastern Star. Men can join that also. And then you have within Masonry, you do have little subgroups, shooting off of this, like the Shriners, of course, and then you have these little state social clubs, and it can vary from state to state. I'm in Maryland, and the one that's real popular in the Baltimore area is called Yed's Grotto. That's a Masonic body that you can join. I'm not a member of it. And you'll get these little social clubs that these guys that pop up. But it's essentially the two main, outside of the Blue Lodge, the two main Masonic bodies are the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. And then probably running third to that would be the Shriners. You do have other secret societies, fraternal organizations that are certainly Masonic-like, but are not really, but are not Freemasonry, such as the Odd Fellows, the Knights of Pythias, although I don't even know if they're still around anymore. The Odd Fellows are still around, but they're really their last bastion is California. Um, But yeah, within the United States, of course, it's the Masonic Blue Lodge, and then the two main high degree bodies are the York Rite and the Scottish Rite.
After the Charlotte, they find that clue, and there's theatrics, and the ship blows up because of all the gunpowder, and now they're separated because you know um, Sean Bean's character wants to go steal the Declaration. Nicolas Cage is obviously against stealing the Declaration, though he does come around to stealing it for its own safety. Now, the big thing here is obviously the Declaration, because it's said to have a secret map on the back, which turns out to be more clues in a way, but very important clues. It's written in invisible ink. Is this something that's been done with Freemasonry in the past?
Well, there are. I mean, I don't know if there are any like hidden Masonic maps on the backs of any famous documents, but there are codes within Freemasonry. There is a code in the Royal Arch degree, like a cipher. So yeah, the answer to the question is yes. There are codes and ciphers within Freemasonry, and again, it really appears in the Royal Arch degree, because I believe it's a cipher that they use. There's something in there I can't recall off the top of my head, but there's something in there that requires a cipher, and you can find it in the literature. It's in Duncan's manual, I know that, but I can't just off the top of my head. I just can't remember what it was used for. But there are Masonic codes. They do exist.
Yeah, and so these the cipher that it's kind of given leads them to the Silence Dogood letters, which was obviously written by Ben Franklin again, coming back to where we kind of started, under the pseudonym of Silence Dogood, because he wanted to write, but his brother wouldn't let him write into the newspaper, so he made up this character and wrote. In the movie, they say he was 15, but I think he was actually 16 when the Silence Dogood letters came out. Now, at that point, this is before he joined the lodge. Would he have been able to hide Masonic things in there, or would that have been like a later cipher if this was like a real treasure map?
Right, right. I mean, he would not have known Masonic codes or anything like that, at that point in his life. I don't know what age he was when he became a Freemason, but the code, the encoding is the high degrees, and at that point in time in the country, the high degree bodies weren't really in existence at that time. They were to a point, but they were more scattered around. They weren't organized or unified. So that would have just been something. Again, this is just Hollywood being Hollywood at that point.
Making a good story, yeah. And then this leads them to New York. I guess not right away, but eventually they get to New York,
Right.
and that's when they get to the cathedral, and they find, obviously the famous Masonic symbol on the tomb and in the catacombs, and that's where the secret passage is to go down into this underground chamber where eventually the treasure is. Now, have we seen similar things happen maybe in earlier times, like say in Europe, where they found these secret catacomb, like underground chambers in Europe?
Well, the thing is that's kind of the whole. That's kind of like the whole lore of this thing, and makes this thing kind of really strange. Um, is the ritual, the Masonic ritual in the movie has in the movie, the subterranean vault is discovered beneath the holy ground in New York. And again, that's a reference to this guy named DeWitt Clinton. In the ritual, the treasure vault. I mean, you know the story. The treasure vault in the ritual is they go into the Temple Mount where Solomon's. What's happening in the ritual is the Jews are in captivity in Babylon, and this guy named Zorobabel, this Jewish governor, and his name Zorobabel means the mouth of Babylon or the heart of Babylon. You can look at it either way. Is given license by the Babylonian king named Cyrus the Great to return to the Holy Land to rebuild the temple. Solomon's temple is wiped out. When he when he goes to the Temple Mount, they're clearing the rubble away, and they discover this subterranean. They discover this trap door. They spring it, and it leads to this subterranean treasure vault. And in the ritual, the pillars of Enoch are down there, and the name of God are down there. And this ties into what's happening in the Blue Lodge. It's the recovery of what is lost in the Blue Lodge. It's kind of like the Golden Fleece allegory, the search for the Golden Fleece. And you have to be very, very familiar with happenings in the Blue Lodge to understand what's happening in this degree. So they find this subterranean treasure vault filled with this treasure, and of course, it's the ritual, and in the ritual as it exists today, it's Jewish temple builders. Now, when the ritual was originally done by the Jesuits, the people who found the the treasure vault were Knights Templar. And again, you begin to sit back in your chair and think to yourself, is this ritual trying to encode some sort of real history? Because I mean, this is what we've always been heard was, when the Templars went over into Jerusalem, one of their headquarters was the Temple Mount, and the story is that they found something over there. Whatever this was, I mean, we could speculate on this all night. I mean, you know the stories as well as I do. The Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, Kabbalistic wisdom, documents. I mean, you name it, it was there. Alien life, a time machine. And the story goes that whatever was there, they brought back to Europe. And the general thinking is that it must have been some sort of wisdom, because when they return to Europe, that's when you get these geometrically perfected buildings popping up all over the place. These Gothic cathedrals, they're aligned perfectly to the solstices and the equinoxes and this star and that star and Sirius and Regulus and this, that, and the other. And the general thought is that they must have found something over there, and they turned this information over to these, temple workers, the stone workers who could make sense of this stuff. And that's where you get these, magnificent, Gothic cathedrals from. And of course, the Templars were arrested. And of course, I have to mention this. I mean, they were arrested on Friday, October the 13th, which is, of course, tomorrow. And there's all kind of rumors that all hell is going to break out tomorrow, and I think that's very ironic that on the day that the Knights Templars were arrested on October 13th, now here it is October 13th, almost 2023, and chaos is ensuing, very very synchronistic, as it were, as Jung would say or Schwettenberg would say, but at any rate, the story from here is that the Templars, of course, disappeared. A lot of them were executed and tortured. But whatever this treasure was, it kind of vanished. I mean, and the general theory is they took it to Scotland, and of course, they may have wound up with Oak Island on it, with it, which again is a subterranean vault. So you begin to ask yourself with this ritual, with this Royal Arch ritual, as it's presented in the movie, is this whole notion of the Templars finding something on the Temple Mount as it is in the ritual, is this some sort of real yet lost history that's trying to be communicated to us through this ritual? It's very fascinating. I mean, I think because of the emphasis, my personal opinion is that because of the emphasis placed on this ritual, and it's really the ritual that helps define the United States of America, if not defines it, outright, that there must be something to this. And that's again, that's kind of where I am at with this. And if you're interested in this, again, shameful plug, shameless plug, I guess. I wrote a 700-page book about this whole ritual. It was my first book called The Royal Arch of Enoch, and again, this is where I analyzed, the first National Treasure movie and the second one also, which carries forward these themes to a certain extent.
Yeah, you brought up Oak Island, and as I was watching this, it was almost like, because there's a lot of rumors of what's in Oak Island, if there is anything at Oak Island, but a lot of the treasure that supposedly could be there, you kind of see referenced in National Treasure when they do find that treasure room. Do you think that's intentional? Like, do you think and I guess this can go into a second question. The people writing it had to have had some knowledge of Freemasonry, obviously. So do you think that's kind of maybe telling something about Oak Island, or
Well,
just happenstance?
there's no direct reference in the movie to Oak Island. It's a theory. I was actually on the History Channel talking about this. That one of the things in Oak Island could have been this Knights Templar treasure, and the reason that that's possible is there's a lot of nexuses to this Royal Arch degree that you will find in Oak Island. It's somewhat been discredited or discarded. I mean, it's there. It's one of those things we just don't know. I mean, we just don't know. I mean, is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? Probably not. But is it possible or probable? Yeah. I mean, there's a grain of truth to it. I mean, there's a grain of possibility to it. I wouldn't discard it outright. I'll put it to you like that. I agree with you 100% that the people who were behind this movie and who crafted it or wrote it, must have had knowledge of Freemasonry. If they didn't, it's one of the greatest examples of coincidence or synchronicity that I could find because, I mean, they just did such a fantastic job of putting this ritual on the big screen. So, yes, I mean, I can't imagine that the people who didn't write this or have creative input on it weren't Freemasons. That would be almost impossible for me to believe. Yeah, just because the movie is just so wrought with Masonic, currents, both overt and covert. Um, so, I mean, the movie as it is a fantastic, I mean, fantastic as in great retelling of the ritual. The Oak Island aspect is certainly possible. The movie doesn't really get into it, but again, if you look at, all I can say is if you look at Oak Island and you look at this Royal Arch of Enoch ritual and the Templars, there are clear parallels with them. I mean, there are absolute parallels with them. Whether that's all it is open to speculation.
Yeah, and before we go on, you did speak about being on history and talking about that. Do you know the episode for the viewers so they could check that out?
Yeah, it was. I don't know. I don't know it was. Hang on, I could pull this up real fast. I could pull up. It was two series I was on. It was, and they both had to do with the Oak Island show. Let me pull up. Like, I can't give you the exact episode number. Maybe that's why I'm going to Internet Movie Database because here it was. I was on Beyond Oak Island. I was on The Curse of Oak Island Drilling Down. I was on and one episode of each of those. So whatever you just have to go in and look. Um, but I was on one episode of The Curse of Oak Island Drilling Down, and I was on Beyond Oak Island. So I was on one episode of those. I just can't remember what the episode. I think one of the episodes was called like Oak Island and the Founding Fathers. I can't remember the name of the other one. If you go to my website, there's probably some information about it. I'm sure if you go to Internet Movie Database, you could find it out much more easily.
Yeah, so for new viewers or listeners, make sure you go check that out. You earlier when you were kind of talking about some of these Masonic treasures or things that the Knights Templar might have had, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and then you kind of even got to aliens and that kind of stuff. It sounds very familiar to another pretty big treasure franchise, i.e., Indiana Jones. Is where do you find that connection there? I mean, is that kind of a Masonic thing in there, or is that more just famous treasures that Indiana Jones is going after?
Yeah, I mean, I would just describe that as just more famous treasures that Indiana Jones is going after. My personal belief with the Templars, I mean, I believe it's wisdom. I think they found some sort of knowledge that would what it would be to me, some sort of sacred, ancient knowledge, scrolls maybe or something of that effect. That to me is likely what they found. There could have been material wealth there as well. With the Indiana Jones stuff, yeah, I mean, it's really more of a case of, it's just an adventure movie, just using treasures. I would say there's really nothing Masonic about them per se, but there is some kind of cool little references in there that if you pay attention to it, you can kind of pick up on. I mean, especially really in the first one, what was it? It was, you get the whole thing with Gnosticism and Judaism in it, with, the Ark of the Covenant and the Staff of Ra is 72 inches, and of course, Ra is the Egyptian sun god. But this points the location to the Jewish treasure. It's kind of the whole idea of, Moses being Hermes Trismegistus, this, Egyptian wizard. I mean, I think it's funny that the thing that points to the Jewish treasure is, the staff of Ra, the Egyptian sun god. And then, of course, the staff of Ra is 72 inches originally, which is, of course, 72 degrees. The sun moves backwards every 1 degree of the precession of the equinoxes. Ra is the sun god. You get the whole nexus with Moses. The word Shem Ham Forash, the name of God, consists of 72 letter groups. This was the word allegedly used by Moses to part the Red Sea. 72 demons in the Ars Goetia. So I kind of like that. But then, of course, when the guy says, he says, "Oh, well, wait a minute." He says, take back one kadam, which is the measurement, to honor the Hebrew God whose ark this is, and that's an overt, obvious reference to the demiurge. in Gnosticism, that the demiurge is, the God of Abraham, the God of Mohammed, sort of this botched deity. And of course, only the demiurge would demand that you take back one Kadam to honor him. That's Jehovah, Yahweh, sort of the demiurge. Only he would request something like that. So you definitely get into this whole Gnostic aspect with Indiana Jones, with the demiurge, with Judaism, with Egypt, sort of this melting pot that was very popular in the Renaissance. Hermes Trismegistus, was he Moses? Was Moses an Egyptian wizard of some kind? So yeah, I mean, I really like that aspect of Raiders of the Lost Ark when they got into that. I thought that was very well done by Lucas.
Yeah, I know some other pretty fantastic treasure movies. I know some people just consider National Treasure a treasure movie. But it follows this really cool adventure thing, much like Indiana Jones, but also the newer Mummy movies, where it just has this fun and treasure. But like we've been talking today, it has a lot more Masonic symbolism. You didn't mention Da Vinci Code earlier. Is there any other like really heavily just kind of Freemason movies like National Treasure?
Well, I mean, I would definitely say National Treasure. I mean, if you asked me to name a Masonic movie, that would be it. Some of these themes, again, I'll kill three birds with one stone here, because you have the first National Treasure movie, which I would say, if you asked me to name a Masonic movie, that would be it, because that has, I mean, that encodes a ritual. I don't know too many other movies that really do that, and do it covertly. A Mason, I picked it up. But if you were a non-Mason, you weren't a high degree, that might pass you over. But just for the National Treasure, being a Masonic ritual, that takes the Oscar for being the granddaddy of Masonic movies. National Treasure 2 carries some of this forward a little bit, because if you remember, when they need wisdom, they go to chapter 13 of Riley's book. And again, this is a reference to the Royal Arch Ceremonial, which is depicted in the first one because it's the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite, chapter 13. Again, if you're familiar with the ritual, it has to do with the restoration of lost wisdom. So they need wisdom. They go to chapter 13. That's a little Masonic reference there. And then when you get to the end of the movie where Nicolas Cage is talking to the president about the book, the president says, take a look at page 47. That's a reference to the 47th problem of Euclid. That's the Pythagorean theorem. That's the symbol of a Masonic worshipful master. So again, we have another Masonic logo there. If you carry this forward, you actually, believe it or not, find some of the same symbolism with the Da Vinci Code. And again, because it's a treasure hunt and it has to do with the wisdom, it's the search for knowledge. Whenever there's a clue needed in Da Vinci Code, this is the first one. I mean, when I say the first one, I know there's other Dan Brown, books that have been made in the movies. But if you remember, whenever they need a clue, it's always the number 13 turns up. I mean, the Mona Lisa is in Hall 13. When the keystone, which is an overt Masonic reference to the Royal Arch, is in the back of the van in the armored car. He says something like, "Hey, I want to buy your Rolex," or what time is on your Rolex. Pause it, because it's 112. 1 plus 3 is 13. Again, that's a little, again, reference to the 13th degree of the Scottish Rite, the Royal Arch of Enoch. Keystone's in the back of the van. You see where I'm going with this. So you will find these same sort of Masonic themes going on in Da Vinci Code. And this was, again, another movie that I analyzed in my very first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, because it has these Masonic, Royal Arch of Enoch, both, overt symbolism and undercurrents. So, yeah, I mean, that movie, Da Vinci Code, even though it's really not Masonic per se, definitely includes Masonic symbolism.
Yeah, and you were kind of talking about time and numbers, and I know one part of this movie was the clock on the $100 bill said 222. Is that of significance?
Yeah, I mean, isn't it like 322 or something? I can't remember, because
Yeah,
320,
with time with the new daylight savings, it was ended up being 322.
yeah, because 322 is Skull and Bones. And I thought that was kind of unique. At the time, I don't know when that bill was designed. I'd have to go look, because Skull and Bones doesn't come on the scene to 1832, which is of course Lodge 322. And probably is the closest thing you'll find to the Illuminati existing today. I mean, even mainstream scholars suggests that, when William Huntington Russell went to Germany, which is, of course, was the stomping ground of the Bavarian Illuminati, the University of Ingolstadt, that he brought this thing back with him to the United States, and this is basically a reinvention of the old Bavarian Illuminati. It's possible, probably more tilting towards probable, if anything. But I did find that interesting that the time was 322, which is, of course, the lodge, of Skull and Bones there at Yale University. So interesting.
Yeah, you definitely have these other ones like Skull and Bones, the Rosicrucians. I know both of them kind of get a lot of bad rap. Do you feel that way being in the Masonic, or do you think it's just another group like the Masons?
Skull and Bones is certainly Masonic-like. Skull and Bones was actually a creation because of the backlash against Freemasonry. Skull and Bones was a reaction to the anti-Masonic reaction. Um, that's how Skull and Bones came on the scene, or part of the reason, at any rate. The Rosicrucians, they're sort of what I would call proto Masonic thought pattern. There's no evidence to really suggest that the Rosicrucians were existed. They seem to be like a phantom organization that no one could find. Um, the books written about the Rosicrucians by the main scholars, by the legitimate ones, will essentially conclude that Rosicrucianism is a thought, is a mode of thinking. It's a progressive mode of thinking in the 17th and 18th century that was rational, scientific, gave way to the Age of Enlightenment, things like that. And the whole, when you get into the Rosicrucianism, the two people who were behind Rosicrucian thought that turns up in the Rosicrucian manifestos in the early 17th century, the two men behind that are Giordano Bruno and John Dee. And of course, Christian Rosencross. I mean, where does this name come from? Christian Rosencross, Christian Red Cross. It goes back to, John Dee, and if you read, The Fairy Queen by Spencer, the first book is The Red Cross Knight. Red Cross Knight is, of course, John Dee, who's trying to create the universal empire with Queen Elizabeth. And of course, this is what John Dee was trying to do, and he hangs around with a character called Una in The Fairy Queen. And that's a reference to Monis, which is his work, the Monis Hieroglyphica. So, the Fairy Queen, the Red Cross Knight, this ultimately becomes Christian Rosenkreuz, Christian of the Red Cross. And then, of course, years later in the 19th century, John Dee's, fellow mathematician, Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland, who was a mathematician also at Christ Church there at Oxford, which I had the privilege of being there, at both St. Catherine's and Trinity College. In Alice in Wonderland, you have the scene where they're painting the rose bushes white to red. That's an allusion to the Rosicrucians, to the Red Cross Knight, to John Dee himself, Lewis Carroll's fellow mathematician. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to Rosicrucianism, the real way to properly view that is a mindset, really more than an organization. And again, Skull and Bones is Masonic-like, but really not attached to Freemasonry.
Yeah, and I know there was the Georgia Guidestones that were recently, unfortunately, blown up that were kind of affiliated with the Rosicrucians. Do you think that was fair assessment, or do you think it was someone else that put those up?
Well, I think it's intentional because the whole thing with the Rosicrucians was this sort of what I would call, it was to live in harmony with nature, and to, this was all the thought of Giordano Bruno. It's Dee and Bruno whose philosophies lie behind Rosicrucianism. What was Bruno's philosophy? Man needs to live in harmony with nature. Man can't abuse the environment. Man shouldn't be deforesting, chopping down trees. He needs, you'll constantly hear harmony and nature, and you can't destroy the earth. And this is, of course, picked up, when you're doing the Georgia Guidestones. I mean, what was their whole thing? I mean, man should live in harmony with nature. So, the guy who funds them, of course, uses this, the whole Rosicrucian Giordano Bruno allure, and calls himself R.C. Christian, which is a complete reference to the Rosicrucians. But again, it's what were the Rosicrucians, what was sort of the mindset? It was live in harmony with nature, and again, this comes more from Bruno than with Dee. But again, this was the whole thing with the Georgia Guidestones was, keeping the population under control, whether you like it or don't like it. I mean, I know they were recently dynamited, but the whole there's it's easy to see the link between sort of the Georgia Guidestones, which I guess was sort of like the high holy site for the climate change movement, I guess, or for environmentalism, I guess. I guess that's probably the better word to use. Environmentalism was just to live in harmony with nature. And again, this was a tenet of Bruno. And again, his thought is behind Rosicrucianism, at least part of it. So, the fact that the guy who was funding these things called himself R.C. Christian, that comes as little surprise to me because I can completely see the nexus between what the Guidestones were saying and what the Rosicrucians, at least in theory, were, promulgating.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to go off another kind of tangent. I know we're supposed to talk National Treasure, but you made me
That's
think
right.
of something that we just saw up in Wyoming. It's called the Ames Monument, and it's this pyramid uh, in an old site of Wyoming that used to be a town, and it's the only thing left of the town. But it's kind of like a two-step pyramid, and I wanted to know if that was symbolic of anything.
I'm not familiar. I'm looking at it now. You're showing me. I've never not I have no familiarity with it, so I really can't. Until I'd have to do some research on it. But I mean, it looks like it's some sort of Native American structure of some kind, just based on what you're just showing me. But I'd have to research it to be able to give you some more definitive answer.
Yeah, and so with pyramids and stuff, because it comes up in the movie and stuff, and obviously in the Eye of Providence, what's the symbolism there and the importance there with the pyramid?
Right. Well, I mean, this ties into just Masonic lore, and again, the legendary history of Masonry. That again, Masonry in the end of the day is stone building. I mean, it's construction, and of course, the Masons, the people who build the pyramids, were Masons, and of course, Masonry descends from this. So, I mean, it's a it's you get into the legendary history of Masonry. You get to the Tower of Babel, the pyramids, the great Gothic cathedrals. These are all the forerunners of modern day Freemasonry. But of course, Egypt is, so key in all this because, this is where geometry originally, if you read the Masonic lore and the legends, this is where geometry is invented. The measuring of the Nile, the flooding, the measuring of the Nile, this gave rise to geometry, which of course is what the letter G stands for within Freemasonry. And then, I mean, it's just, so many Egyptian motifs. You get Hermes Trismegistus, who is, the restorer of the seven liberal arts. So he becomes, the de facto godfather of all Freemasonry. The third degree ritual in the Blue Lodge is the retelling of the Osirian, mystery school with the assassin, with the killing of Osiris, the assassination of Osiris, his resurrection, Isis, Sirius. I mean, all these motifs turn up in the Blue Lodge. So, I mean, there is a heavy Egyptian theme within Freemasonry. And again, pyramids, the all-seeing eye, Sirius, Isis. I mean, I'm talking about the goddess, not the terror group. These are all prevalent themes in Freemasonry.
Yeah, and I know we see a lot of like obelisks as well. I mean, is that pretty good correlation there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that ties into within Freemasonry. The most important symbol within Masonry is the sun, and of course, the obelisk is symbolic of the sun. So, 1 and 1 equals 2.
There's a lot of pretty famous sites in here. I think it was Trinity Cathedral is the cathedral towards the end of the film, and then there's obviously, you know, Independence Hall and everything. Have you been to some of these famous sites? And if you have, what are kind of like the Masonic symbolism that you might pick up from the architecture within them?
Well, I've been to Independence Hall once, but I drove by it. I didn't actually go in it. I mean, I've been to Washington D.C. countless times. I used to work down there, so I mean, I used to go to Washington D.C. 5 days a week. And yeah, I mean, they're just the whole template. I mean, you get into all kind of Masonic, themes and symbols and the architecture down there. I mean, that's really, sort of like a Masonic metropolis, I would say, because of, you just got loads of solar imagery. I mean, you got different alignments to different star systems. That's the as above, so below of Hermes. So yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, in Baltimore where I am, you'll actually see some of this stuff duplicated in Baltimore with the Basilica, with the George Washington Monument in downtown Baltimore. They're both on Charles Street. Um, because it's the same architects. I mean, the guy who did the Capitol is Benjamin Henry Latrobe. He did the Baltimore Basilica, and then the guy who did the obelisk, the Washington Monument obelisk, is Robert Mills, and he did the Trajan Column, George Washington Monument here in Baltimore. So you'll see parallels, with this stuff. And yeah, I mean, if you got the Masonic eye, and you can definitely start seeing the stuff. Definitely pick up on it.
Kind of going to Baltimore, because earlier you mentioned Edgar Allan Poe and his story. Was he a Mason then, or did he just have
No,
connections?
no, he was not a Freemason. He gets the story with him is, I mean, he writes a lot of, I mean, he has a lot of occult themes in his works, mesmerism. I mean, even you know he has a lot of esoteric themes in his work. And the one of the main influence on him was when he was at West Point, a guy named Ethan Allen Hitchcock, who was into mysticism, was into Rosicrucianism. If you ever wanted to identify an American Rosicrucian, it would probably be Ethan Allen Hitchcock. I believe he's the grandson of Ethan Allen, who, of course, is the Masonic founder of Vermont or New Hampshire. I'd have to go look that up. The Revolutionary War hero, Ethan Allen. But when Poe was at West Point, the influence on him was through this guy named Ethan Allen Hitchcock, and but Poe himself was not a Freemason. But yeah, again, the one story he wrote, The Cast of Amontillado, is sort of a allegory. It's not sort of, it is an allegory for the William Morgan affair.
Yeah, and talking about another revolutionary kind of hero that everyone knows about is Paul Revere. Obviously, towards the end of the movie, that's how they throw off Sean Bean's character. Was he was a Freemason, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Paul Revere was a Freemason. Washington, Franklin. I'd have to go look. Just some of the guys at the Declaration of Independence. I think Caesar Rodney was. John Adams was not. But a lot of the so I think it's nine. Like I said, 9 to 12, maybe. I'd have to just go look it up. But Paul Revere, yes, Freemason.
Kind of getting into the second one. I know it kind of dabbles around like Native American treasure and the Lincoln assassination and John Wilkes Booth. Is there any real connection there as far as Freemasonry, or is that definitely Hollywood magic, so to
Yeah,
speak?
well, Booth. If you watch the second movie, Booth opens the movie with Albert Pike. Hanging around with Albert Pike, who is, of course, the what was a big time Scottish Rite Freemason, who was a former Sovereign Grand Commander. There's no evidence Booth was a Freemason. Now, some of his family was. I believe his father, Julius, was, and Edwin was, his brother. But it seems to have skipped over John Wilkes Booth. He was in something known as the Knights of the Golden Circle, which was a sort of quasi Masonic secret society that was designed to perpetuate the Confederacy. Was the Knights of the Golden Circle. But Booth was not a Freemason. Abraham Lincoln, not a Freemason. Albert Pike was. And there's a heavy dosage of him in the second one. I think Ed Harris plays his descendant, but if I remember right. But yeah, that was there was yeah, like I said, there was a Masonic thing going in there, but it's escaping me now. In the first one, the first one had, it was the first one that had the 40, where he says, take a look at the page 47, and then there's the book. Maybe that's in part two. I can't remember. There's one where the book is chapter 13. Maybe that's part two. I can't remember. It must be. Yeah, it must be part two. And again, that's the Royal Arch reference there, because every time they need wisdom, it's chapter 13. And if you're familiar with the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite, that's all it is the restoration of antediluvian wisdom. So that was the reference there. I'm just mixing the movies up now. But yeah, I like National Treasure too, and it always you wonder when they're going to come out with the third one, if ever. I know they did the TV show. I don't think it did very well. In fact, I think it was canceled. I never saw a second of it though.
Yeah, I didn't even know it had come out until I was doing research for this, and I was like, oh, there's a TV show. We actually got to take part in the cornerstone ceremony of our new library. I wanted to show you it and kind of have you maybe explain to the viewers what was going on. So let me,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, if it,
Oh, yeah. There you go. Yeah, so this is common. This is a Masonic cornerstone ceremony where they were blessed the stone. I think it's with like corn, wine, and something else. And that's what they're doing right there. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That they're all held in public. People can attend them. So they did the one in the Capitol, George Washington, for the Capitol building in D.C. Did the one for the United States Capitol. So yeah, I mean, anytime you want to have the Masons routinely will do the cornerstone ceremony. They bless it. I think it's corn, oil, and wine. I think they bless it with, but I'd have to go look that up. But yeah, no, that Masons do that all the time. Absolutely.
yeah, it was pretty neat. And who knows, Sam and I might be a Freemason ourselves at some point. Uh, but we got some comments on there, and now that we have you, because you said Pike, and that triggered me to remember this. But there was a lot of argument between somebody, and I can't confirm that they were a Mason, and somebody that definitely wasn't a Mason. Um, but one guy said Pike, the writer of the Masonic Encyclopedia, said that Freemasonry is indeed a religion. There was a guy that responded, I am a master Mason, and no, it is not a religion. It is the opposite. It is a fraternity of individuals of all different beliefs and walks of life that come together, that are passionate about making the quality of their life and quality of the other lives better. Which one do you think is better or more true, I guess?
Oh, the second comment is definitely more accurate. Albert Pike is a whipping boy for the conspiracy people. He doesn't write the encyclopedia. He writes a book called Morals and Dogma: The Scottish Rites, published in 1871. It's the first book published in the United States, comparative religion book, and he borrows heavily. It's plagiarized all over the place from the works of a French ceremonial magician named Eliphas Levi. And the reason it draws such ire from the conspiracy people is Pike in an 800-page book compares at one point in time the planet Venus to Lucifer, and because of this comparison, all Freemasons everywhere on planet Earth are devil worshippers. And like I said, he's comparing the planet Venus. Is compared to Lucifer, which means the light bearer, and that's of course what Venus is. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm up early. I'm up every morning at 5 a.m. with my dog. I'm up that more early every morning anyway. And when I go outside with my dog, I mean, I'm entreated to a light show. I mean, I've got right now at this time of the year, I've got Orion and Sirius ascending in the south. And if right now, I mean, if you look right now, this is October 12th. I mean, you can see the crescent moon. You got Venus burning bright as hell, and then you've got Regulus right next to it, which is part of Leo. Um, and of course, that's why Venus is known as Lucifer. It bears the light. It brings the light. It's always there right before the sunrise. That's why it heralds the coming light, the sunrise, the morning sun. Um, and if you're on the East Coast, I mean, you're up early enough. I mean, go out right now and check it out in the morning. I mean, you get the crescent moon, you get Venus, and then if you get Venus, look a little towards the north, to the north left of Venus. You'll get Regulus. You can't miss it. That's one of the big stars in Leo. And then if you look up and if you look to the south, you'll see Orion. And then if you follow the three kings, the three stars in Orion, you'll see Sirius, which is the second, which is the brightest star in the north in the night sky. And then if you look up straight ahead and you go to the right a little bit, you'll see Jupiter. So you really got a lot going on in the night sky right now.
Yeah, very cool. Sam, do you have some questions you want to ask regarding all this?
I mean, you kind of already asked all my questions that I had.
We can wrap it up here. My voice is beginning to give out. I've been going for an hour, and after an hour when I do these shows, that's when my voice really starts to crack a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, me and Sam Matt will stay on a little bit later. But yeah, we can wrap it up here.
We did
Um,
good. That was a great show, man. I mean, we really
yeah,
covered that movie well, and I didn't know we'd get an hour out of it, but that was really good. I really enjoyed that.
yeah. I try to really take a lot of notes and things that I really wanted to ask you, and then luckily you said Pike, and I was like, oh, that totally reminds me because we got so many comments about that on that one video.
We definitely, without question, did a deep dive into National Treasure. That is irrefutable, and by far and away, this was probably the most I've ever analyzed that film, and the second one, and even Da Vinci. It's been a while since I've talked about them because, again, these were all in my very first book. But it's great to go back and revisit them because they are great examples of how movies do encode these different hidden themes and symbols. And what makes those three movies so great is it's Masonic. I mean, those are three movies that really do hide these hidden, that conceal these Masonic undercurrents, and they do it very, very well.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much again for joining us and giving so much knowledge. Before you do
Mhm.
leave, though, do you want to let the viewers know where to find you? Because
Oh yeah, sure.
kind of a little update on your video that we did last time. In the last day, it's gotten 20 hours worth of viewing. So it's blown up. Hopefully, you get some more views from this one. But where can people find you?
Oh yeah, well again, thank you for having me on Culz Paranormal. It was my pleasure to be here, and we will definitely do it again. I'm glad the videos are always doing well. Um, Yeah, my name, the website where you can find me is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan the fourth. So that's my website, www. Robert W. Sullivan, and for the fourth, it's the letter I and the letter V, Robert W. Sullivan IV. At my website, there's information about me. There's a biography. There's links to purchase my books. They are available in print form and ebook form, except for the work of fiction. The ebook is not yet out with that, but that is forthcoming. But you can get it on Amazon, all the major online retailers. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. Podcasts I've been on, such as this one, are posted there. I have a blog that's routinely updated with interviews and information. Again, go there and check it out. It's the best place to find me and find information about me. And again, links to buy the books. www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. And again, thank you so much for having me on. It was my pleasure to be here.
No, thank you again for joining
Yeah,
us.
thank you.
It means a lot because you gave us a lot of knowledge that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good night. I'm going to sign off.
All right, you
Thank
have a
you.
good one.
Okay.
Bye.
So before the three of us continue, we again want to say thank you to Robert for joining us. He's always a wonderful guest. This is the second time he's been on the channel. So make sure if you haven't seen his past interview, go watch that. We talk about a whole host of different topics. Make sure you go check out those links and help support him for taking the time to come out and talk with us about National Treasure. But this is where our team is going to take over and kind of give more of our kind of review of the film itself to give you guys kind of that full deep dive that we usually do because we want to do this one a little bit different. There's a lot of symbolism that I definitely wanted to talk about on the team. So, Sam, was this the first time you had watched National Treasure?
Why, yes, Keegan. Yes, it is. No, it's not. I watched it kind of back when it came out. I have it on DVD as well and watched it like a couple of times, but didn't um, bring it close to or make the connection with Freemasonry about it besides what they like kind of were mentioning. But like when I was younger, I definitely didn't put that connection together and actually look at it in that kind of way. I just saw it as like another treasure movie, like Indiana Jones and Tomb Raider, which were out around those times as well.
Yeah, and talk about National Treasure. I looked at where my DVD came from. Look at that Blockbuster.
Blockbuster.
Back when it was right
So
next
that
door to
means he
work.
stole it.
I didn't steal it. I just spent all my money at Blockbuster every Thursday. Maybe not all my money, but I
That
did.
is true.
I did keep them open for a while.
Hey,
Matt,
I would rent games from there.
right? Oh man, those were the best. We'll have to hit that B&B because I know there used to be two, and I know it's down to one, and they kind of converted that one into a B&B. So definitely is a video we gotta check out. Matt, this isn't the first time that you've watched, I know, because when I was talking about it when we were at Bobby's, you're like, no, that's the second one. So I know this isn't the first time you've watched it.
I've seen this one multiple times. I thoroughly enjoy it. Like I said, as a kid growing up, who didn't, or especially as a boy, have treasure maps and talk about treasure and whatnot. So it was a movie that always fascinated me from the early on. And very similar to Sam. I really didn't put, the Freemasons. I always thought, as a kid, you're not really believing into it. It's a movie, it's Hollywood. And then now the more, I talked with you and realized, oh no, it is a real thing, and did more research on my own. It's really cool to kind of tie it all together now, and really makes you wonder.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of Freemasonry symbols, but to the extent of the Freemasonry, I did not know until we were able to talk to Robert the first time, and he discussed that, and that's again kind of where we got the idea to do this deep dive, because who better to do a deep dive on National Treasure than a Freemason? So definitely very exciting. It does hold up really well. I hadn't watched this in a few years. I mean, probably 5 or 6 or so years. It has been a while. I've definitely seen the second one more recent than the first one, and it holds up pretty well. I mean, it's kind of in that, cut of the cloth, as maybe not as good as Indiana Jones, but it's kind of like that. And it's also kind of like the 90s Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser, where it's just so much fun and history. And I mean, there's a lot of people that talk this got them into Freemasonry, but how many people probably got into treasure hunting because of this as well? Sam,
True.
you are wearing a special hat. Is that in because of National Treasure at all?
I mean, kinda. It's a trichome pirate hat because it
I was gonna
was
say
to
more
deal
like
with treasure and stuff. So I was just like, what is
Jack Sparrow.
what is like a hat that I can wear that kind of ties in but doesn't at the same time? And I was just like, oh, I have a trichome pirate hat from like a Halloween costume that this is the only part that I have left of. And so I was just like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna wear a pirate hat because we're talking about treasure.
Have you seen the second one, Sam?
I believe so, but like not recently, so I'm not entirely it's definitely been a while for the second one, so I would have to rewatch it to actually confirm that I have watched it or not. I'm not actually sure if I have or not.
Yeah, and so we've all most likely seen the second one. But Matt, have you seen the series at all? Because I know it came out. Um, Riley comes back in it at one point, but I don't think Nick Cage or anyone else is in it. Have you seen that series at all?
No, it's on my watch list though on the Disney Plus. I added it to it because, like I said, I enjoyed the movie, so it was something I wanted to check out. But with football starting and hockey starting, it's falling aside right now.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe after, because we got 2 more episodes, season one, Project Blue Book. Maybe after that, because I don't think there's many episodes, we can watch the National Treasure series to tie into it and do some reviews of. I want to ask you though, because we talked about those other ones. Obviously, Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. Brandon
Hmm.
Fraser is the Mummy. Without him, it's not the same.
Are you sure you're
Nicholas
saying his name right? Isn't it
Brandon
Fraser?
Fraser. Uh,
Fraser.
uh, but this movie is Nicolas Cage. Like, I don't think anyone else could carry it without. I mean, Nicolas Cage is a different actor for sure.
Hmm. Unless they like redid it, but then again, if they did that, it would be like Batman all over again, where it's just different actors, or the Joker, like different actors, and it's just they just continuously retry it and retry it and retry it, and it's I don't know, it's like there's certain people that can do it, and then after that you should just almost give up on it essentially. I mean, some people can pull it off, but it's just kind of it's not the same without like specific people that played those roles.
Yeah,
Very
and I
true.
think I think we saw that with Han Solo when they remade that one. They recast it, and I actually think he did a pretty good job. It's really hard to fill in those iconic roles. So
True.
especially when they're a face role, like the Batman or the Joker, they're hidden behind makeup, behind the mask, whereas these guys are like flesh and bone, and it is that person. It is Harrison
Hmm.
Ford, and usually, like I think if they were to continue, I know this is what they do in National Treasure. They have to go younger, probably with a different cast, and
Hmm.
continue it that way. And I know National Treasure does it. I think the last Indiana Jones kind of was going that way. I haven't seen it yet, so I can't really tell you guys. That's another one we'll watch because those are some good ones as well. Sam,
Fair.
any actors or that stood out to you here? How was the acting for you?
In the movie, I mean, I thought the acting was pretty good. I
Just
mean,
pretty
they
good.
said, I mean, I thought it was great, but like, it is also funny where it's just Ian was telling him, he was just like, Nick, we play poker. I know your poker face. You're definitely lying. And it's just like, yeah, no, you could tell when he was just like trying to lie, but like was clearly giving away that he can't lie.
Well, and that helps towards the end. He does go full Nicolas Cage in that scene where they don't find the treasure. He's just like yelling,
Yeah,
and you're like, "This is the Nicolas Cage I love." Like it just
right.
reminds me of like Wicker Man and stuff. Like so good. Like Nicolas Cage is the best. He might not be like the
Hmm.
best actor of all time, but he's
I mean, he
awesome.
does really good
He's
with like the
awesome.
roles that he has given.
He knows what he's supposed to go for sure. Like he knows what the director's asking. It's kind of like
Oh yeah.
Johnny Depp for Jack Sparrow, kind of mentioning him earlier. He definitely
Oh
knew what
yeah.
he was supposed to go for there.
No, he knew what he was doing, and they probably were just like, yeah, just do something, you'll be fine. And he's just like, all right, I got this.
I got this. I don't know. How do you feel about how the clues and the story progress? Like, do you think it's realistic or do you think it was like Hollywoodized? Do you think?
I mean, I know he mentioned it, like there is symbolism in like a lot of stuff, but like if you were trying to hide stuff like that, like something that you didn't want to be hidden, I thought the clues were like actually pretty good because for one, they were on certain things that like obviously no one besides people in kind of the ability or masons that could have access to some of those stuff would be able to get access to and know how to cipher it besides people that are, I don't know, put their like trying to figure out all the ciphering from it as well. So I thought it was really good because it was like clue after clue, and like the amount of clues that it was giving, like you could tell some people were ready to be like some people gave up because they was just like it's clue after another clue after another clue, and it's like that whole kind of that whole theory where it's just like you never know, like unless you like keep pushing until like you literally can't find anything else, you never know how close you are to that like treasure or to whatever you're trying to achieve unless you just like keep pushing and keep prying at it a little bit. And yeah, no, I thought the clues were really good.
Yeah, and speaking of Ian, who was played by Sean Bean, for Sean Bean fans, he actually lives in this movie. He does
Yeah,
not die at the end. It's not Lord of the Rings. It's not Game of Thrones. Like he dies. Oh man, let's see. I'm gonna pull up and fact check myself. See, because I know for sure those two. I mean, those are pretty notable deaths. I'm pretty sure he
while he's
dies
doing
in.
that, I'm gonna have to say those glasses are really cool. I almost want a pair of those. I think I
Oh, the Ben
when I
Franklin
first
ones.
saw that, yeah, the
Yeah.
ones with like it has all color spectrums. I think the right side was like a red green, and the
Hmm.
other side was a blue. Um, what was it? What was the other color? It was like blue
Blue
yellow or
red.
something.
Yeah, one
No, it was
was.
like blue red, and then it was green yellow.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, no, because the one
Those are
side
the
had
colors,
red, the
though.
one side
Yeah.
had blue, but it was like I think it was blue yellow and then green red, or it was vice versa, where the it was blue green and red yellow.
Right. Okay. So I have a list. They have lists because maybe we'll do a top. Maybe we'll do a tier or a top 10 list of Sean Bean deaths. But obviously, Fellowship of the Ring, he dies. We know that. Talked about it. It says Henry the Eighth. Never seen that.
Boromir!
But yeah, yeah, right. The Island. I forgot he was in that. He is shot. Far North. Never seen that. He dies. Outlaw. Again, not seen that. The Hitcher. Never seen that. Red Riding, never seen that.
Red
Black
Riding Hood?
Death,
You never seen that?
no, it just says Red Riding. Death Race 2, Cash, Game of Thrones, as we talked about. Age of Heroes. So those are some of them. before we just make this a Sean Bean death one. Matt, how did
Let's
you
put
feel
a
about the acting?
let's put a spoiler up in there too, man. Thanks. Now I'm not gonna watch any of these movies because now I know he dies.
You should already know like the two most famous ones. I mean,
Well,
Lord
no,
of the
I know
Rings,
those
Game of
two.
Thrones, like
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a Lord of the Rings nerd. That one was a little too much walking for me, you know. But I'm with the guy in what was the movie Clerks 2 where he's just like, let me show you like episode 1. He's walking. Episode 2, oh look, a ring. Throws it in the whatever. Oh look, more walking.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that way about it. But no, I like the acting. I think Diane Kruger played a great job with her role as Abigail, but in the reality, what person who really is in charge of the Declaration of Independence would really let what happened to it happen to it at the father's house? It would be
yeah.
more, no, we're calling the police. This is my government job. I'm not going to jail for this type thing. But she bought into the
I don't blame
event.
her because you see that and like you would have it would spike my curiosity even if it was my job. It would be like there is something here. I'm actually curious about it.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
it's the document. Do you really take the chance of something happening to it and then possibility of
True.
ruining one of the greatest pieces of art, and
History.
almost artificial, but the actual part of history?
I mean, true, but they were taking, for the most part, the really good care of it. They were being very careful.
Throwing it in the street.
Yeah, throwing it in
I
the
mean,
street,
that was
banging
her
it
fault.
around.
He never threw it in the street. She
Oh,
just
yeah.
tripped and then let go of it, which, I mean, if
No, but there is
I would
there
have
is that
blamed her.
scene where they're in the van and he's like, "No one's gonna steal it. No one," and he's like shaking it back and forth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but he also has it like in
rigorously.
like two different types of tubes protecting it.
Yeah,
Because
but
he
you
had
can
it
hear it
in that
shaking
one that
around
he had
though.
it in that like white plastic thing, and then he had it inside that other case. So it
Yeah.
was inside of two other things.
Matt, how did you feel about the like the clues and how the treasure hunt went? Like, is it a little too much? Did you feel it was the right amount? Like, how did you feel there?
No, it was the right amount. Unless you were, and also if you weren't a true historian, you would have been lost. Like, I forget what clue it was, but it was like where they looked at the back of the $100 bill. It's like, where in that clue the hell did he get? Look at the back of the $100 bill to find out what exactly time, and then to know to go where the bell used to sit, and then to look for the cross on the wall. I was like, I didn't get any of that out of that clue that they got, but so I would never have found the treasure. I mean, I don't even know if I would have found the Charlotte.
Right. And I just remember when they dug that up, and he kind of just haphazardly digs it up. But Matt, you were like, of course, that's the first thing they would find, right?
Right, is the word Charlotte. Out of the whole ship, they find the word Charlotte is the very first thing.
Right. And then that poor ship, so important for so many years, just blown up, just gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, and
So,
then, like I said, their curiosity didn't, go off to dig in the rest of the gun barrels, but the one that Captain was holding, all of a sudden he thought, I'm gonna dig into the gunpowder. So it just, I don't know. I mean, like I said, you had to have been really smart if there really is clues out there like this. I wouldn't be able to find it. So don't count on me being on your treasure hunt team. I'll be
you're
like the Riley though, where I'll say something dumb and quirky and just be that funny guy, and then maybe I'll have a genius thought that pops into my head, and then I get shot down because you guys already know. I'm like, thanks.
Right.
when you just see a pair of stairs and be like, look, stairs.
Yep,
Are you
I'm so
crying?
happy for it.
Look, stairs.
He definitely had some good lines that made us chuckle for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, acting's good,
This
story's
whole thing
good,
with the statue.
or the part where
Look
he's
at you.
like,
You
"Wait
look
a minute,
significant. Blue with a weird goatee.
but remember when he was like, wait, you guys don't know?" And he's like, "Let me soak this in." And they're like, come on, just
Yeah.
tell us. And he's like, nah, you guys don't know. It was, I saw someone listening to it, and they're like, if you've ever been on a road trip with someone that knows history and you know something they don't, you understand that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then I also want to know what that 1% was. Like, what dollar amount was there? Because I mean, obviously they have a nice house and land and everything like that, but it's like, all right, what part of town was that in? Is that in a yuppie town? Like anywhere in Denver, you have a house like that, it's already like $7 million. But
Like,
like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you got to wonder
Well,
what that 1%. It's like how many
he's
billions of dollars did that treasure go for, or the prize for it was? It just makes you wonder. I want to know the dollar amount. That's where I get kind of my curiosity.
no, I definitely feel that. He did say it was like a historic house from a certain time period, so it probably was a lot.
Yeah.
one, it made me think when Matt said that about Nick, that other YouTuber we were kind of talking about, giving some tips about his Colorado video. He went to some of the bad parts. He's like, yeah, this is apparently the bad part, and this house is $500,000.
Yeah, this is where you get
Mm-hmm.
shot at. You want to live on the floor, and yeah, it's $500,000.
Also, Matt, we already are looking for treasure. Remember we talked about going to look for the secret treasure?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Because speaking of a Gates, Josh Gates, maybe I don't know, is that a connection? Were they trying to tip us off? But Josh, I can't talk now. Josh Gates did his expedition unknown about that, and I know there's three been found. I don't know how many there were. I think like eight. So yeah, at some point treasure hunting here at Culz. Sam, you also enjoyed the Ferrari at the end.
Oh, I mean, I didn't enjoy the Ferrari. I just was kind of comical about like how he got that, and then it sounded like he was still trying to learn how to drive it because it definitely didn't like he was trying to take off too quickly, went into the grass, and then there's like a slow speed away, and it was just like, all right, bro.
He's definitely blown out the clutch on that one.
I
Oh,
mean,
easily.
I know it comes back in the second. I know there's some gags with it in the second. So yeah, we'll definitely have to watch the second and then meet again with Robert and go more in depth. Maybe do just like we want to do Young Guns 2. We'll do a National Treasure 2 deep dive. So I don't know. I enjoyed it though. It was fun. Sam,
Maybe I think he kind of covered everything in the second one in this one, but maybe we can come up with some stuff.
I'm sure we can. I really kind of just powered through that one. Didn't take notes. I just wanted to see kind of some basics. Um, so I'm sure if we take notes and stuff, we'll have more talking points like we kind of did with this one. But Sam, how did you feel overall about the film? Like, what is your rating recommendation?
I would do an 8 out of 10, and I would definitely recommend it if you're curious about, as Robert said, a Masonic ritual. I mean, it's definitely a really good one for that. If you like an interesting kind of treasure hunt type of movie, it's also pretty decent for that one as well. It's definitely kind of talks about history too, for the most part, kind of. So it definitely hits that category as well. So I would definitely recommend it, and it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty decent on history. There's definitely things that I got wrong. We can do that maybe in a different episode, but yeah, I enjoyed it. It's fun. Like I said, it held up really well. It's not perfect, but 8 out of 10, I think, is a pretty good rating, I would say as well. Matt,
I'm gonna go a little bit higher. I'm gonna go a 9 out of 10. This one sits, when I give my top 20 movies, this one sits just on the outside. So it's one of my honorable mentions. Like I said, it always intrigued me just because, like I said, what little boy didn't grow up looking at a treasure map or making one, or just like digging in dirt, just hoping to find something in your backyard. Um, I enjoy it. It's definitely a recommended movie to see. Um, The nostalgic is there. It's a great movie.
Yeah. So, Sam, any final thoughts before we close out this episode of Deep Dives?
Not really.
No.
I think I'm good.
Matt, what about you?
I think, like I said, we kind of hit on it. It's a good movie. Check it out. Definitely entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so here you go. Hopefully, you guys learned some stuff about Freemasons. Maybe if you go back rewatch it, you'll see some more of the stuff. So, yeah, hopefully, you guys enjoy this episode, and definitely let us know if you do go rewatch it and if you picked up on some hidden symbols. Thanks to Robert and all the knowledge he shared with us. And again, thank you to Robert for joining us. And make sure you go help support him. Check out his books and his website. Lots of good stuff, and we definitely have enjoyed talking with him. But if you want to see more Culz deep dives, click that link on your left. For more about us here at Culz Paranormal, click that link on your right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe.
Subscribe. And switch that notification bell from personalized to all if you want to be notified on all of our videos.
And let us know anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted us to talk about for National Treasure. And for sure, let us know if there's any films you want us to talk about on a deep dive, because we're more than happy to do any film that you want us to talk about. And hey, check us out. We're also now on YouTube Music for Culz Reviews Deep Dives.